Commander Zixtal spent a sleepless night wrestling with the implications of what he had learned about human expansion. The revelation that humans had been secretly establishing colonies throughout the galaxy for centuries challenged everything the Velthrons believed about their role as the premier explorers of space. The next morning, Jake Morrison invited the Velthron delegation to a final meeting where he promised to answer all remaining questions. They gathered in the same secure facility where the scope of human deception had been revealed the day before. "You have been very patient with us, Commander," Jake began, "and we appreciate that you have listened with an open mind to some very disturbing revelations." "Disturbing is an understatement," Zixtal replied. "You have shown us that humans pose a potential threat to the security of every spacefaring species, or we have shown you that humans could be valuable partners in maintaining galactic stability." Jake countered, "The choice of how to interpret our capabilities is yours." Colony historian Linda Foster activated the holographic display once more, but this time it showed a different view of human expansion. Instead of just marking settlements, it displayed the complex network of relationships that humans had built with other species. "What you see here is not a military conquest," she explained. "It is a web of cooperation and mutual benefit that humans have been building for centuries by deceiving everyone about your true capabilities," Corthell pointed out. "By avoiding unnecessary conflicts while we learned how to fit into galactic society," Linda corrected. "Humans discovered early that honest expansion led to wars that nobody won." Steve Johnson stepped forward to explain the human philosophy that had guided their secret expansion. "When our first explorers ventured into space, they encountered the wreckage of civilizations that had destroyed themselves, fighting over territory and resources," he said. "We decided that there had to be a better way, so you chose deception instead of honesty." Zeth Ara observed, "We chose patience instead of aggression." Steve replied, "We chose integration instead of isolation, and we chose cooperation instead of competition." The display shifted to show specific examples of how human settlements had contributed to the stability and prosperity of various regions. In some cases, they had provided advanced technology to struggling colonies. In others, they had served as neutral mediators in conflicts between hostile species. "You have been manipulating galactic politics for centuries," Zixtal accused. "We have been participating in galactic politics," Steve corrected. "The manipulation comes from species that use military force to impose their will on others." Engineer Pete Williams activated a technical display that showed the true capabilities of human technology. The advanced systems they had developed through centuries of careful research and experimentation were impressive by any standard. "Our technology may appear primitive to outside observers, but it has advantages that pure alien designs lack," Pete explained. "By combining the best elements from multiple species, we have created hybrid systems that are more adaptable and more efficient." "You have been stealing technology," Kethmos accused. "We have been learning from technology," Pete replied. "Every spacefaring species does the same thing when they encounter something new and useful." Jake Morrison stepped forward to address the fundamental question that had been hanging over their discussions. "The real issue here is not what humans have done, but what we intend to do going forward," he said. "You have discovered our secret, and now we must decide how to proceed. You could report what you have learned to your government," he continued. "That would likely trigger investigations and possibly conflicts as various species try to determine the extent of human capabilities. Or we could work together to find a better solution," he concluded. "What kind of solution?" Zixtal asked. "Gradual disclosure," Jake replied. Instead of a sudden revelation that could destabilize the galaxy, we could work with the Valthrons to slowly reveal the true scope of human expansion. The proposal was intriguing, but Zixtal was not sure it was practical. How would that work? He asked. Colony. Administrator Sarah Mitchell outlined a plan that the humans had clearly been developing for some time. We would begin by revealing a few additional human colonies in regions where they would not threaten existing territorial claims, she said. Over time, we would disclose more settlements while demonstrating that human expansion has been beneficial rather than threatening. The goal would be to normalize the idea of extensive human presence throughout the galaxy, she continued. By the time the full scope is revealed, other species would already be accustomed to working with human settlements. Technical specialist Chris Adams added another element to the proposal. We would also begin sharing some of our hybrid technologies with allied species, he said. This would demonstrate that human advancement benefits everyone rather than threatening anyone. The plan was sophisticated and showed the same strategic thinking that had enabled humans to expand secretly for so long. What guarantee do we have that you would honor such an agreement? Zixtal asked. The same guarantee that has governed human expansion for centuries, Jake replied. Mutual benefit. We succeed when our partners succeed. And if we refuse to cooperate? Korthul asked. Jake's expression became serious. Then you would have to live with the knowledge that humans are far more capable than anyone realizes, and that we have been present throughout the galaxy much longer than anyone suspects. Is that a threat? Zixtal demanded. It is a reality, Jake replied. The human expansion cannot be undone. Our colonies exist whether other species acknowledge them or not. The question is whether we reveal ourselves as friends or as strangers. Colony founder-descendant Tom Bradley offered a historical perspective on the choice facing the Velthrons when my great-grandfather helped establish this colony. He faced a similar decision. Tom said, he could have tried to build an isolated human settlement that ignored the rest of the galaxy, or he could have built something that contributed to galactic society. He chose integration and cooperation. Tom continued, that choice has served us well for nearly 3 centuries. As the discussions continued, Zixtal found himself facing the most difficult decision of his career. The humans had presented him with evidence that they possessed capabilities that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. They had also demonstrated that they had been using those capabilities responsibly for centuries, working to build stability rather than to create chaos. You are asking us to become partners in your deception, he said finally. We are asking you to become partners in a careful transition to a new galactic reality. Jake replied, humans are already a major presence in space. The only question is how other species will respond to that reality. Zixtal looked around the room at his companions and saw his own uncertainty reflected in their faces. The discovery of extensive human expansion changed everything they thought. They knew about galactic politics. If we agree to work with you, what would happen to this colony? He asked. Haven Valley would continue as it always has, Jake replied. A thriving human settlement that contributes to the prosperity and stability of this region. But gradually, we would reveal more about our capabilities and our connections to other human settlements. He continued, the deception would end, but it would end gradually in a way that minimizes disruption, the proposal offered. A path forward that avoided the immediate conflicts that sudden revelation might trigger. It also gave the Velthrons time to adjust to the new reality of human capabilities. I need time to consider this, Zixtal said. Of course, Jake replied. This is not a decision that should be made hastily. That evening, as the Valthron delegation discussed their options in private, Zixtal realized that the humans had positioned them perfectly. They had revealed enough to make secrecy impossible, but they had also demonstrated that cooperation was more beneficial than conflict. What they have accomplished is remarkable. Korthul admitted, a secret expansion program that has operated successfully for centuries. It is also deeply deceptive, Zathara pointed out. How can we trust a species that has been lying to everyone for so long? Perhaps the question is not whether we can trust them, but whether we can afford to oppose them, Kethmos suggested. The next morning, Zixtal gave Jake Morrison his answer. We will work with you, he said, but this partnership must be based on complete honesty going forward. Agreed, Jake replied. The age of secrets is ending. It is time for humans to take their proper place in galactic society. As the Eternal Seeker prepared to depart Haven Valley, Zixtal reflected on how much his understanding of the galaxy had changed. The humans had shown him that strength came, not from military might or advanced technology, but from patience, intelligence, and strategic thinking. The real shock was not that humans had capabilities beyond what anyone suspected. The real shock was that they had used those capabilities to build, rather than to destroy. The revelation that Haven Valley was not what it seemed left Commander Zixtal feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Jake Morrison had admitted that the colony was part of something larger, but the full scope of that deception was only beginning to become clear. I want to see everything, Zixtal demanded. No more games, no more careful answers. If you want us to understand what you really are, then show us. Jake nodded slowly. Very well, Commander. But I warn you that what you learn may change how you view humanity forever. They were taken to a secure building in the center of Haven Valley that Zixtal had assumed was simply another administrative office. Inside, however, they found sophisticated equipment and displays that revealed the true nature of the colony's operations. Mary Chen, the colony librarian, activated a massive holographic display that filled the room with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked with symbols that Zixtal did not recognize. This is the real scope of human expansion, Mary explained. Each symbol represents a human settlement or outpost. Zixtal stared at the display in shock. The marked systems spread across vast regions of space, including areas that were supposedly unexplored or claimed by other species. If this map was accurate, then humans had established a presence throughout the galaxy. This is impossible, Korthul whispered. According to our intelligence, humans have barely expanded beyond their home sector. Your intelligence is based on what we wanted you to see, Jake replied. The official human expansion follows predictable routes and establishes colonies in obvious locations. The real expansion has been much more extensive and much more careful. Technical specialist Chris Adams joined them at the display and began highlighting different regions with various colors. Green markers are fully established colonies like Haven Valley, he explained. Yellow markers are outposts and research stations. Red markers are strategic monitoring posts. And the blue markers, Zixtal asked, pointing to symbols scattered throughout Vilethran space. Those are integration sites, Chris said carefully. Places where humans live and work within alien societies. The implications were staggering. Humans had not only spread throughout the galaxy, they had infiltrated other civilizations. Zixtal wondered how many humans might be living on Vilethran worlds. Without his people even knowing, Tom Bradley stepped forward, and Zixtal recognized him as one of the senior colonists who claimed descent from the original founders. My great-grandfather was on the colony ship that established this settlement, Tom said. But that ship was never lost, as your records indicate. It was part of the Deep Range Colonial Program. What is the Deep Range Colonial Program? Zethara asked. A classified human expansion initiative that has been operating for over 4 centuries, Tom replied. While the official colonies drew attention, the deep-range ships were establishing hidden settlements in strategically important locations. Mary Chen activated another display that showed the timeline of human expansion. The official timeline that appeared in galactic databases showed a slow, cautious expansion beginning about 100 years ago. The real timeline revealed systematic exploration and colonization that had been underway for 4 times as long. Why? The deception. Zixtal demanded, why hide your true capabilities? Because early human explorers learned that being seen as a threat was dangerous. Jake explained, when humans first ventured into space, they encountered species that had been expanding for thousands of years. Older civilizations did not react well to aggressive new competitors. So you decided to appear weak instead, Kethmos observed. We decided to appear manageable, Jake corrected. Just advanced enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to be threatening. Engineer Pete Williams joined the discussion and activated a technical display that showed human spacecraft designs. Our official ships use technology that appears consistent with a young spacefaring species, he explained. Simple fusion drives, basic sensors, limited range, but your real ships. Corthel asked. Pete smiled, and the display changed to show sleek vessels that looked nothing like the crude human ships in Valethran databases. Our real ships use hybrid technology developed by combining human engineering with systems we have encountered from other species, Pete said. They are faster, more efficient, and much more capable than anything we officially acknowledge. The revelation that humans had been reverse engineering alien technology for centuries was deeply disturbing. It suggested a level of technological espionage that challenged the security of every spacefaring species. How do you obtain alien technology for study? Zixtal asked, though he suspected he did not want to know the answer. Trade salvage exploration, Jake replied. When you have been traveling the galaxy for as long as we have, you accumulate a lot of interesting hardware. Colony historian Linda Foster activated another display that showed the philosophical framework behind human expansion strategy. Our ancestors realized that in a galaxy dominated by established powers, the greatest advantage was not having the biggest fleet or the most advanced technology, she explained. It was being underestimated. While other species competed openly for territory and resources, humans developed a strategy of patient, careful expansion. She continued, we established our presence, quietly integrated ourselves into existing trade networks, and learned everything we could about galactic politics. And when conflicts arose, Zixtal asked, we stayed out of them, Linda replied. Why fight wars when you can expand while your potential enemies are busy fighting each other? The display showed a complex web of relationships between human settlements and various alien civilizations. Humans had positioned themselves as useful but non-threatening partners to dozens of different species. You have been playing a galaxy-wide game of strategic deception for centuries, Zixtal realized. We prefer to think of it as intelligent adaptation. Jake said, humans excel at finding creative solutions to complex problems. Steve Johnson, the colony's external relations coordinator, stepped forward to explain another aspect of their strategy. One of our key insights was that most species focus on military and technological competition, he said. They measure strength in terms of fleet size and weapon power. But humans focus on different metrics, he continued. We measure success in terms of adaptability, information networks, and long-term positioning. The display showed how human settlements had been established near critical trade routes, resource-rich systems, and strategic choke points throughout the galaxy. You have been positioning yourselves to control galactic commerce, Corthul observed with growing alarm. We have been positioning ourselves to survive and prosper, Steve corrected. Military conquest is expensive and temporary. Economic influence is cheaper and more durable. As the true scope of human expansion became clear, Zixtal realized that his people had seriously misjudged this young species. Humans were not the primitive, aggressive race that Valthron intelligence described. They were patient, strategic thinkers who had been quietly building a galactic presence for centuries. How many people know about this? He asked. On the human side, the deep-range colonial program is known only to those directly involved, Jake replied. Maybe a few million people out of our total population. And on the alien side, Zixtal pressed, very few. Jake admitted, most species are not looking for deception on this scale. They assume that what they see officially represents the full scope of human capabilities. The revelation that humans had been operating a secret galactic expansion program under the noses of every major species was both impressive and terrifying. It demonstrated a level of organizational capability and strategic thinking that challenged every assumption about human limitations. What happens now? Zixtal asked. Now that we know the truth, Jake's expression became serious. That depends on what you intend to do with this information, Commander. The weight of the decision pressed down on Zixtal. His discovery could change the balance of power in the galaxy. If he reported what he had learned, it might trigger conflicts that could destabilize entire regions of space, but if he remained silent, he would be participating in the deception that humans had been perpetrating against his people for centuries. You knew this moment would come eventually, he said. We have been preparing for it. Jake acknowledged. The question is whether we can find a way forward that benefits everyone. As Zixtal considered his options, he realized that the humans had put him in an impossible position. They had revealed their secret, but they had also demonstrated that they possessed capabilities that could threaten any species that opposed them. The game was far more complex than he had ever imagined. Commander Zixtal woke before dawn on his third day at Haven Valley with a growing sense that something was very wrong. The humans had been polite and helpful, but every answer they gave only raised more questions. No isolated colony could possibly be as advanced and prosperous as what he had observed. He gathered his team early and announced his intention to conduct a more thorough investigation of the colony's capabilities. Chief Science Officer Corthul had arrived on a shuttle during the night with additional scanning equipment and a team of specialists. I want detailed scans of every facility in this settlement, Zixtal ordered. We need to understand exactly what these humans have built here and how they built it. Jake Morrison met them at breakfast with his usual friendly manner, but Zixtal noticed a subtle change in the man's demeanor. There was a watchfulness in his eyes that had not been there before. We would like to conduct a more comprehensive survey of your colony, Zixtal announced. With your permission, of course. Of course, Jake replied. We have nothing to hide, though I should mention that some of our facilities are involved in sensitive operations that we prefer to keep private for security reasons. What kind of sensitive operations? Corthul asked. Mining mainly, Jake said. We have found some valuable mineral deposits, and we prefer not to advertise their locations, Dan Brooks, the mining operations supervisor, joined them for breakfast, and Zixtal was immediately struck by the man's confidence and expertise. When Korthul asked about their extraction methods, Dan launched into a detailed explanation that revealed techniques more advanced than anything the Veltherans currently used. "Your extraction efficiency rates are remarkable," Korthul admitted. "We achieve perhaps 60% recovery from similar ore types while you claim to reach over 90%. "We have had time to perfect our methods," Dan replied. "Plus, we learned some tricks that are not in the standard textbooks." "What kind of tricks?" Kethmos asked. Dan smiled. "Trade secrets? A colony has to maintain some advantages." The evasive answer troubled Zixtal, but he decided to wait and observe before pressing the issue. Instead, he asked to visit the mining operations personally to see these advanced techniques in action. The mining complex was located several kilometers outside Haven Valley, and the journey there provided another surprise. The transportation system consisted of vehicles that moved with smooth efficiency along perfectly maintained roads. The vehicles themselves showed design elements that were clearly more advanced than standard human technology at the mining site. Zixtal found operations that challenged everything he thought he knew about human industrial capabilities. The equipment was sophisticated and highly automated. The extraction processes were clean and efficient. Most surprising of all, the safety standards and environmental protections were better than those used by most advanced species. This level of automation requires very sophisticated control systems, Korthul observed as they watched massive machines work with mechanical precision. "We have good programmers," Dan replied. "When you need to maximize efficiency with limited personnel, you learn to automate everything possible." But when Korthul examined the control systems more closely, he found computing power that exceeded what should have been available to an isolated human colony. The processors were fast. The software was elegant, and the networking capabilities were remarkable. "Where did you acquire such advanced computing hardware?" he asked. "We make it ourselves." Dan said, "Electronics manufacturing is one of our specialties." That afternoon, they visited the communications center where Sarah Mitchell showed them the colony's information systems. Zixtal expected to find basic radio equipment suitable for local communications. Instead, he discovered a sophisticated network that clearly had capabilities far beyond anything needed for a single colony. "Your communication range is quite impressive," Nix Vera observed. "These systems could maintain contact across interstellar distances." "We like to stay in touch with our neighbors," Sarah replied casually. "Neighbors," Zixtal repeated. "What neighbors?" Sarah's expression flickered for just a moment. Before she recovered her composure, "Other settlements on the planet, of course. We have colonies scattered across several continents." But Zixtal had caught the momentary hesitation, and he suspected that Sarah had been referring to something else entirely. The idea that this colony might be in contact with other human settlements across space was deeply troubling. That evening, they were invited to observe a training exercise conducted by the colony's security forces. Alex Turner, the defense coordinator, explained that regular drills were necessary to maintain readiness for potential threats. What Zixtal observed was not a colonial militia conducting basic training. Instead, he watched a professional military force executing complex maneuvers with advanced weapons and sophisticated tactics. The equipment they used was clearly designed for combat against technologically advanced opponents. "Your security forces are remarkably well trained," Lisa Hayes observed. "We take defense seriously," Alex replied. "A colony that cannot protect itself will not survive long." "Protect itself from what?" Zethara asked. Alex's expression grew serious. "There are hostile forces in space. Pirates, bandits, worse things. An isolated colony makes an attractive target. How do you know about these threats? Zixtal pressed. Have you encountered hostile aliens? We have had some experiences, Alex said carefully. Nothing we could not handle, but enough to teach us the importance of being prepared. The implications were staggering. If this colony had fought off attacks by hostile aliens, that meant they possessed military capabilities far beyond what any human settlement should have. It also meant they were not as isolated as they claimed. The next morning brought an even more disturbing discovery. While examining the colony's historical records with librarian Mary Chen Kethmos, found references to technologies and events that should not have been known to an isolated settlement. These records mention contact with the Zenthari Confederation, he reported to Zixtal. But the Zenthari are located on the opposite side of the galaxy from human space. Perhaps the records are in error, Zixtal suggested, though he was beginning to doubt that explanation. There are also references to trade, relationships with multiple alien species. Kethmos continued, and detailed information about galactic politics that could only come from direct observation. When Zixtal confronted Jake Morrison with these findings, the colony administrator's response was carefully neutral. Our founders were very thorough in their record-keeping, he said. They documented everything they learned during their long journey to reach this world, a journey that, according to your own records, took less than 2 years. Zixtal pointed out, how could they have learned so much about galactic affairs in such a short time? Perhaps our founders were more capable than you assume, Jake replied with a slight smile. That afternoon, technical specialist Chris Adams made a slip that revealed the true scope of the colony's deception. While demonstrating what he claimed was primitive human manufacturing equipment, he accidentally referred to design specifications that could only have come from reverse engineering advanced alien technology. Where did you learn about Vilethron? Power coupling designs, Korthul demanded. Chris's face went pale as he realized his mistake. I must have read about them somewhere, he stammered. Those designs are classified. Korthul said, they are not available in any public database. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This human colony had access to classified Vilethron technology. That was only possible if they had either captured Vilethron ships or obtained the information through espionage networks. I think it is time for some honest answers, Zixtal said. Firmly, this colony is not what it appears to be. Jake Morrison studied the Vilethron commander for a long moment before nodding slowly. You are right, he admitted. We are not just an isolated colony struggling to survive. We are something much more complex. Then what are you? Zixtal demanded. We are the descendants of explorers who learned that survival in a dangerous galaxy requires careful planning and strategic thinking. Jake replied. Our founders discovered early that appearing weak and primitive was the best way to avoid attracting unwanted attention. The revelation hit Zixtal like a physical blow. The humans had been deceiving them from the moment they arrived. This entire colony was an elaborate performance designed to hide their true capabilities. How many other colonies like this exist? He asked. Jake's smile was enigmatic. More than you might expect, Commander. Humans have been exploring and settling for much longer than most people realize. Zixtal felt his understanding of the galaxy shifting beneath his feet. If the humans had multiple hidden colonies with advanced technology, then everything the Vilthrons believed about the balance of power in space was wrong. Why are you telling us this now? He asked. Because you were going to figure it out eventually, Jake replied. and we prefer to control how that discovery happens. As Zixtal processed this information, he realized that his expedition had stumbled onto something far more significant than a lost colony. They had discovered evidence of a human expansion program that had been operating in secret for centuries. The question now was what the Valthrans would do with this knowledge, and whether the humans would allow them to leave with it. The shuttle ramp lowered with a soft hiss, and Commander Zixtal stepped onto solid ground for the first time in months. The air was clean and fresh with the scent of growing plants carried on a gentle breeze. Around him, the human settlement called. Haven Valley stretched in all directions, showing signs of careful planning and long-term growth. A group of humans waited near the landing pad, and Zixtal was surprised by their appearance. Instead of the desperate survivors he had expected to find, these people looked healthy and confident. Their clothing was clean and well-made, and they carried themselves with the bearing of people who had never known real hardship. The human in front stepped forward with a warm smile on his face. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes who moved with the easy confidence of someone used to leadership. "Welcome to Haven Valley," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I am Jake Morrison, the colony administrator. We are honored to receive visitors from the Valthran people." Zixtal was taken aback by the man's knowledge of their species' name. Most isolated colonies would have no idea who they were dealing with when aliens arrived. "I am Commander Zixtal, of the exploration vessel Eternal Seeker," he replied, accepting the handshake. "We were surprised to find a human colony in this region. Our records showed this system as uninhabited." Jake Morrison nodded, understanding. "We have been here for quite some time, but we tend to keep a low profile. Please let me introduce some of our people." The woman beside Jake stepped forward with the bearing of someone used to command. She wore what appeared to be a uniform of some kind and carried herself like a soldier. "This is Lisa Hayes, our head of security," Jake said, "and these are Ben Carter, our chief engineer, and Amy Rodriguez, who manages our agricultural operations." Each human greeted the Valthran delegation with the same calm confidence that Jake had shown. There was no fear in their eyes and no desperation in their manner. They acted like people who were completely in control of their situation. "We have prepared a place for you to stay during your visit," Jake continued, "and we would be happy to show you around our settlement. I think you will find our little colony quite interesting." As they walked through the streets of Haven Valley, Zixtal found himself constantly surprised by what he saw. The buildings were well constructed and showed sophisticated engineering. The streets were clean and well maintained. Gardens and parks were scattered throughout the settlement, showing that these people had time and resources for beauty as well as survival. "How long has your colony been established here?" Cultural analyst Zethara asked as they walked. "Our founders arrived about 280 years ago," Ben Carter replied. "The original colony ship had some damage, and they decided this was a good place to settle down and make repairs. Repairs that took nearly 3 centuries, Kathmos, the xenobiologist, asked with obvious skepticism. Amy Rodriguez laughed. "Well, one thing led to another, and they decided they liked it here. The soil is good, the climate is pleasant, and there are plenty of resources. Why leave paradise?" They were shown to a comfortable building that had been prepared as guest quarters. The rooms were spacious and well appointed with running water, electricity, and even entertainment systems. This was far beyond what any isolated colony should have been able to provide. That evening, Jake Morrison invited the Valthran delegation to dinner at his home. The meal was excellent, featuring both familiar foods from their database of human cuisine and local dishes that showed creative adaptation to available resources. "We are curious about your situation here," Zixtal said as they ate. "An isolated colony so far from human space must face many challenges." "Oh, we manage quite well," Jake replied. "We have everything we need right here. Good land, plenty of water, and all the resources a growing community requires. But surely you must need assistance with medical care or advanced technology," Medical Officer Hicksmole suggested. "We would be happy to share our knowledge and help improve your situation." Jake exchanged glances with Lisa Hayes before answering. "That is very kind of you, but we have our own medical facilities and they serve our needs quite well. Dr. Kate Sullivan has trained our medical staff to handle everything from basic care to complex surgery." "Complex surgery," Hicksmole repeated with surprise. "Using what equipment?" "We manufacture most of our medical devices right here in the colony," Ben Carter explained. "When you have been isolated for as long as we have, you learn to be self-sufficient." After dinner, Lisa Hayes offered to show them the colony's security systems. Zixtal expected to see primitive defenses suitable for protecting against local wildlife. Instead, he found himself looking at sophisticated sensor networks and weapon systems that would not have been out of place on a military starship. "These are quite advanced for a colonial settlement," he observed. "We learned early that preparation prevents problems," Lisa replied. "There are dangers in space, and isolated colonies need to be ready for anything." "What kind of dangers?" Zethara asked Lisa's. Expression grew more serious. "Pirates, raiders, hostile aliens. You never know what might show up in an undefended system." The implications of her words were disturbing. If this colony had faced threats from hostile aliens, that meant they were not as isolated as they claimed. They had encountered other species and survived conflicts with them. The next morning, Amy Rodriguez offered to show them the agricultural operations that fed the colony. Zixtal expected to see basic farming suitable for a struggling settlement. Instead, he found vast automated farms using techniques that were more advanced than anything in the Valthran database. "How did you develop such sophisticated farming methods?" Kethmos asked as they watched machines tend the crops with mechanical precision. "Necessity is the mother of invention," Amy replied. "When you need to feed thousands of people with limited land, you learn to be efficient." "Thousands," Zixtal repeated. "How large is your population?" "About 15,000 in Haven Valley itself," Jake said. "Maybe 40,000 across all our settlements on this continent. This was far larger than any colonial population should have been. A normal, isolated colony would have struggled to maintain a few hundred people over such a long period. Somehow, these humans had built a thriving civilization as they toured the manufacturing facilities Ben Carter showed them production lines that created everything from basic tools to complex electronics. The technology was impressive and showed clear signs of continuous development and improvement. "Where did you learn to build such advanced systems?" Zixtal asked. 3 centuries gives you time to figure things out," Ben replied. "Plus, we had some very smart people among the original colonists. Scientists, engineers, doctors. They passed their knowledge down and each generation added to it." That afternoon, they visited the medical center where Dr. Kate Sullivan demonstrated surgical techniques that were equal to anything the Valthrons could offer. Her equipment was sophisticated, and her knowledge was clearly extensive. "I studied the medical databases that came with our colony ship," she explained. "But most of what we do here was developed through practical experience. When you are the only doctor for thousands of people, you learn fast." By the end of their second day on Haven Valley, Zixtal was deeply confused. Nothing about this colony matched what he knew about human capabilities. They had technology that should not exist. They had knowledge that could only come from contact with advanced civilizations. They had population levels that suggested continuous growth and prosperity. Most disturbing of all, they showed no interest in the advanced technology and assistance that the Vilthrons were offering. Normal colonies would have been desperate for such help. These humans acted like they had everything they needed that night as the Vilthran delegation discussed their findings in private. Zixtal voiced what they were all thinking. There is something we are not being told about this colony. No isolated human settlement should be this advanced or this prosperous. Perhaps they are not as isolated as they claim, Zathara suggested. They may have maintained contact with other human settlements. Or perhaps, added Kethmos, we have seriously underestimated human capabilities. The thought was troubling, but Zixtal could not dismiss it. Everything they had seen suggested that humans were far more advanced than Velthran intelligence believed. If that was true, it had serious implications for the balance of power in the galaxy. Tomorrow they would ask harder questions and demand real answers about how this impossible colony had come to exist. Commander Zixtal stared at the display screen with 3 of his 4 eyes while the 4th watched the crew behind him. The readings made no sense, and he had been studying them for over an hour now. His ship, the Eternal Seeker, had been exploring this sector for mineral deposits when their long-range sensors picked up something impossible. The planet below them showed clear signs of intelligent life, but according to every database in the Valthron fleet, this system was empty. No species had ever claimed this world, and no explorers had ever reported finding anything here. Yet the energy signatures coming from the surface were unmistakable. Run the scan again. Zixtal ordered his sensor operator. The young Velthran named Kylvan worked his controls with nervous precision. The results came back exactly the same as before. There were artificial structures down there, and whoever built them was using technology that generated significant energy output. Commander called out his communications officer, Nix Vera, from across the bridge. I am detecting radio transmissions from the surface. This was getting stranger by the moment. Radio waves were a primitive form of communication that most species abandoned once they developed faster than light travel. Only the most basic civilizations still used such outdated methods. Can you decode the transmissions? Zixtal asked. Nix Vera worked at her station for several minutes before looking up with confusion, written across her scaled features. Sir, the language appears to be human. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member turned to stare at their commander. Humans were a young species that had only recently begun expanding beyond their home system. Their territory was on the complete opposite side of the galaxy from this remote sector. There was no way they could have traveled this far with their primitive ships. Are you certain? Zixtal demanded. Yes, sir, Nixavera replied. The linguistic patterns match human languages from our database, specifically what they call English. Zixtal felt his breathing slow as he considered this information. The Valthrons had been the premier explorers of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They prided themselves on cataloging every world and every species they encountered. Finding an unknown human colony in unexplored space challenged everything they believed about their role in the galaxy. Deploy a scout ship, he ordered. I want Captain Velnara to take a closer look at this world. 20 minutes later, the small scout vessel dropped away from the Eternal Seeker and headed toward the planet's surface. Captain Velnara was one of their best pilots, and if anyone could get close enough for a proper survey without being detected, it was her. Velnara guided her ship through the upper atmosphere, while her sensors painted a detailed picture of what lay below. The continent beneath her showed extensive agriculture and what appeared to be several small cities connected by roads. Everything looked peaceful and well organized. "Commander," she transmitted back to the main ship, "I am seeing clear evidence of a thriving colony down here. Population appears to be in the tens of thousands based on the settlement patterns. Any sign of how they got there?" Zixtal asked. Velnara flew her ship in a wide circle around the largest settlement. Her sensors picked up the remains of what looked like a massive spacecraft near the edge of the city. The design was definitely human, but unlike anything in their current database, sir, I am seeing wreckage of what appears to be a human colony ship. The design is old, maybe 300 years based on the construction techniques visible from orbit. This news sent another wave of surprise through the bridge crew. 300 years ago, humans had barely figured out how to leave their own solar system. The idea that they had sent colony ships to this distant region was almost impossible to believe. "Continue your survey, Captain," Zixtal instructed. "I want to know everything about this colony before we make contact." Velnara spent the next 2 hours flying over every settlement on the continent. What she found challenged every assumption the Veilthrans had about human capabilities. The colonies were not just surviving, they were thriving. She observed advanced agricultural techniques, efficient transportation systems, and what appeared to be sophisticated manufacturing facilities. The humans had clearly been on this world for a very long time and had built something impressive. Their cities were clean and well planned. Their farms were productive and covered vast areas. Most surprising of all, there were no signs of the desperate struggle for survival that typically marked isolated colonies. Commander Velnara reported, "These humans are not just surviving down there. They have built a complete civilization. I am seeing evidence of mining operations, manufacturing centers, and what looks like a spaceport." "A spaceport," Zixtal repeated. "Yes, sir, and there are ships there. Not many, but they appear to be functional. Spacecraft of human design." This was the most shocking news yet. If the humans had working spacecraft, that meant they were not as isolated as they appeared. They might have contact with other human settlements, or even with their home worlds. Zixtal made his decision. "Captain, return to the ship immediately. We are going to make official first contact with this colony. The Veilthrans had protocols for situations like this, though none of them had ever expected to use those protocols with humans. First contact with an unknown colony required careful preparation and diplomatic consideration. Back aboard the Eternal Seeker, Zixtal called together his senior staff. Chief Science Officer Korthul brought up detailed scans of the human settlement, while Cultural Analyst Zethara reviewed what little information they had about human behavior and customs. "We must approach this carefully," Zethara warned. "Humans are known to be aggressive when they feel threatened. An isolated colony might react badly to contact with an unknown alien species. On the other hand," added Medical Officer Hicksmole, "they may be desperate for assistance. 300 years of isolation would strain any colony's resources." Zixtal nodded as he studied the data. "We will proceed with standard first contact protocols. A small diplomatic team will approach their largest settlement under peaceful conditions. We will offer assistance and try to learn how they came to be here." The next morning, the Eternal Seeker moved into a high orbit above the human colony. There, Communications Officer Nix Vera began broadcasting on human radio frequencies using the basic English phrases they had learned from previous encounters with the species. Unknown human settlement. This is the Valthron exploration vessel, Eternal Seeker. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic contact. The response came within minutes and surprised everyone on the bridge with its clarity and calm tone. Valthron vessel. This is Haven Valley Colony. Welcome to our system. We would be happy to meet with your diplomatic team. Please land at the coordinates we are transmitting. The ease of the response caught the Valthrons off guard. Most isolated colonies would have been shocked or frightened by contact with aliens. These humans sounded like they had been expecting visitors. Zixtal selected his diplomatic team carefully. Along with himself, he chose cultural analyst Zethara, medical officer Hixmol, and xenobiologist Kethmos. They would take a shuttle down to the surface and see what secrets this impossible human colony might reveal. As their shuttle descended toward the coordinates provided by the humans, Zixtal wondered what they would find. How had these primitive people traveled so far from their home worlds, and how had they survived for 3 centuries in isolation? The landing pad they approached was clearly well-maintained and showed signs of regular use. That meant the humans did indeed have working spacecraft, which raised even more questions about their true situation. The shuttle touched down gently, and Zixtal looked out at the human settlement that surrounded them. Everything he saw suggested a thriving advanced colony far beyond what should have been possible for such a primitive species. "Prepare yourself, team," he told his companions. "I suspect we are about to learn something very interesting about human capabilities.